and they had a huge argument. And that meant that he was really finished with her. He'd had enough of her prima donna behavior, and that's why he's dumped her.
What if the real story of Harry and Meghan isn't about love, betrayal, or royal drama, but about paperwork? While the world watched a fairy tale wedding, emotional interviews, and explosive exits, another story may have been unfolding quietly behind closed doors. One built not on feelings, but on clauses. According to investigative author Tom Bauer, this isn't simply a romance under pressure. It's a relationship shaped by structure, foresight, and calculated protection. And if even part of his reporting is accurate, then what we've been reacting to publicly, the tension, the lawsuits, the stress, could just be surface symptoms of something far more deliberate underneath. Because when love moves fast, but contracts move carefully, only one of them tends to age well.
Because he was under pressure from Meghan. And Meghan, when she puts on pressure with all her lawyers and all the rest of it, is a terrifying machine. I mean, it's what you call the Sussex war machine.
And to understand why this matters now, you have to look at how Meghan handled the past. Long before royalty, before global scrutiny, before Netflix and memoirs, Meghan had already navigated a marriage. And more importantly, a divorce. Her split from Trevor Engelson didn't explode into public chaos or drag through dramatic courtroom battles. It ended quietly, cleanly, efficiently. Future earnings remained separate. Lingering obligations were minimized.
Now, that was a very interesting story there, because on the Vogue cover story is actually fascinating about her before she marries Harry.
There was no financial bleed, no prolonged emotional spectacle. That doesn't make someone ruthless, it suggests discipline. Hollywood runs on contracts, not sentiment, and Meghan operated inside that system for years. You learn quickly that relationships can end, but paperwork lasts. And once someone has successfully exited one legal union with precision, they don't forget the mechanics. They refine them. They remember what worked. They remember what didn't. That experience becomes a template, not a trauma. And once you've learned how to leave clean once, you rarely walk into the next chapter assuming love alone is enough protection. Meghan never pretended she didn't want more. From childhood, she reportedly told her father she wanted to be famous, to walk red carpets, to be seen. That level of clarity isn't accidental. It's directional. She climbed from small roles to a recognizable television presence, built connections in powerful social circles, and steadily elevated her visibility. Critics argue she understood proximity to influence long before Harry entered the picture. Whether that's fair or exaggerated depends on perspective. But what's undeniable is that she moved upward with intention. Ambition isn't a flaw, it's fuel. But ambition paired with strategic thinking creates something sharper. It means you don't just chase opportunity, you evaluate it. You assess long-term positioning. You look at what something becomes 5 years down the road, not just how it feels today. And when Prince Harry entered the equation, this wasn't just a relationship between two individuals. It was a collision between two entirely different worldviews. Inherited security versus self-built insulation. And that difference would become critical in 2020. The year everything exploded publicly may have been the year everything solidified privately. Megxit wasn't just an emotional break from the royal institution, it was a financial and structural reset. Harry was cutting ties with the system that had protected him since birth. Security arrangements shifted, income sources changed, geography changed, pressure mounted from every direction. And in moments like that, most people operate from emotion. They fight, they defend, they react. But high-pressure environments are also when contracts get revisited. When circumstances shift dramatically, smart operators reassess protections. New earning potential emerges. New liabilities surface. If adjustments were made behind the scenes during this period, and to be clear, that remains speculative, they wouldn't need to be sinister to be powerful. They would only need to be thorough. Emotional people assume paperwork is routine. Strategic people read every line twice. While Harry was battling headlines and institutions, someone else may have been studying structure. And once the dust settled, the public saw independence. What they didn't see was whether the rules of the marriage had quietly evolved with the circumstances. After the royal exit, something subtle began to shift. Publicly, the language was unity. Shared deals, shared projects, shared purpose. But gradually, filings and branding began orbiting individual identity. Trademarks connected specifically to Meghan's name. Solo ventures positioned independently. Intellectual property separated with precision. None of it was loud. None of it screamed conflict. It was clean. And that's what makes it interesting. People who don't anticipate change tend to mix everything together. People who plan ahead separate assets early. This isn't about rebellion. It's about insulation. Each independent venture creates distance between joint identity and personal control. Meanwhile, Harry remained heavily associated with shared narratives. Lawsuits, memoir revelations, institutional battles. One partner became increasingly vocal and exposed. The other became increasingly structured and contained. That asymmetry doesn't require confrontation to exist. It builds quietly. And when brand, ownership, and leverage start drifting into separate lanes, it raises an uncomfortable question. If everything is secure, why create so much separation? Many people default to one assumption. California is a 50-50 state. But equality only applies when nothing else overrides it. Prenuptial agreements exist for a reason. Amendments exist for an even bigger reason. Courts don't divide vibes or intentions. They divide what was documented. If income streams, intellectual property, and future ventures were clearly defined and insulated early, then the default split becomes irrelevant. Preparation isn't punished in legal systems, it's rewarded. And this is where the contrast becomes stark. Harry's value has always been narrative-driven. Legacy, titles, lived experience, emotional authenticity. Meghan's value appears structurally documented. Brands, filings, ownership positions. Courts can divide shared assets. They can't divide leverage that was never shared to begin with. That doesn't make anyone a villain. It highlights foresight versus assumption. And when those two philosophies coexist inside a high-profile marriage, stress doesn't arrive suddenly. It leaks slowly. You see it in posture, in hesitation, in repeated grievances that circle without resolution, which leads to the most uncomfortable layer of all, the psychological imbalance. The most powerful imbalance in any relationship isn't money, it's mindset. Harry operates from reassurance. He speaks emotionally, reacts publicly, fights battles in the open. His instinct is loyalty. He defends, explains, exposes. Meghan, by contrast, appears to operate from optionality. Optionality means never standing in a position where you don't have alternatives. It means building exits even while smiling at entrances. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but together they create hierarchy. The person who can walk away clean always holds more power than the person who believes walking away isn't on the table. And you can feel that tension without anyone saying it out loud. Over the past few years, Harry hasn't looked explosive. He's looked eroded. No dramatic collapse, just a slow leak of certainty. Interviews where conviction sounds rehearsed. Court appearances where posture feels heavier than words. That isn't scandal. That's disorientation. It's what happens when someone senses the ground beneath them may not be as stable as they assumed. And when awareness begins forming without clarity, stress shows up long before announcements ever do. Here's something people overlook. Visibility feels powerful, but silence is often more valuable. Harry has chosen exposure. Memoirs, interviews, legal battles, public grievances. Every time he speaks, he gives context, emotion, and detail. Openness builds sympathy, but it also reduces mystery. Meghan, in comparison, has grown increasingly restrained. Fewer reactive interviews, fewer emotional outbursts, more controlled appearances. Silence in high-stakes dynamics isn't weakness. It's preservation. It keeps leverage unspoken. It keeps options flexible. The louder one partner becomes, the quieter the other can afford to be. And in negotiations, whether personal or legal, the person who says less often holds more cards. That doesn't mean something dramatic is imminent. It means the dynamic is asymmetric. One side narrates the struggle. The other side curates positioning. And when positioning is curated carefully enough, no confrontation is required. Power maintains itself quietly. Which brings us to the real asset at the center of all this. If this ever moved toward formal separation, the headlines would scream about payouts. But money is loud. Leverage is quiet. The most valuable assets here aren't houses or contracts. They're stories. Access, timing, silence. Royal proximity isn't just symbolic, it's monetizable. Shared experiences tied to monarchy, family conflict, institutional secrets, those carry long-term value. Whoever controls how those stories are told controls public memory. And public memory is influence. Foundations, branding rights, intellectual property, future interviews, these aren't emotional trophies. They're strategic assets. If narrative channels were positioned to flow more strongly in one direction, the imbalance becomes structural, not sentimental. Courts can divide shared property. They can't divide private experiences unless both parties agree to reveal them. And when one partner has historically shown comfort with exposure, while the other demonstrates comfort with containment, negotiations don't need to be aggressive. They only need to be patient. That's the uncomfortable truth hiding beneath the California sunshine aesthetic. Strip away the personalities, and this story becomes something simpler: preparation versus assumption. Harry was raised inside an institution where protection was inherited. Advisors handled complexity. Security was structural. Contracts were managed by systems. Meghan was raised in environments where nothing was guaranteed, and everything required self-navigation. You protect yourself because no institution will do it for you. Those two philosophies can coexist in harmony until pressure arrives. And pressure arrived fast. When systems collapse, the person who understands structure adapts quicker than the person who relied on it. That doesn't make one side evil, it makes one side experienced in uncertainty. If Tom Bauer's analysis holds even partially true, then what we're witnessing isn't sudden breakdown. It's gradual recognition. Recognition that commitments entered emotionally may have been interpreted strategically. And once that realization forms, it doesn't explode. It lingers. Heavy. Quiet. Unsettling. Watch closely and you'll notice something subtle. The tension surrounding Harry isn't fiery, it's fatigued. Legal battles stacking up, commercial deals fluctuating, public perception shifting in waves. When someone feels securely positioned, they project calm certainty. When someone feels slightly behind in a game they didn't realize was being played, they project urgency. Urgency to explain. Urgency to defend. Urgency to correct the record. Meanwhile, structured positioning doesn't require urgency. It requires patience. Stress in that context becomes a signal. Not of guilt, not of collapse, but of imbalance. People feel imbalance before they understand it intellectually. The body reacts before the mind names it. And once imbalance becomes visible, the outcome doesn't need to be dramatic to be decisive. It simply needs to follow the structure already in place. So here's the part that unsettles people. This may not be a story about villains or victims at all. It may be about fine print, about how love feels mutual while contracts define reality, about how one person believed emotion would guide the future while the other ensured the future was secured, regardless of emotion. Preparation doesn't look dramatic when it's happening. It looks responsible, strategic, calm. But when preparation meets assumption, confusion follows. And history tends to favor the person who prepared for enforcement, not the person who hoped enforcement would never be necessary. If something signed years ago is only now being fully understood, that realization won't arrive with fireworks. It will arrive quietly, in posture, in hesitation, in the slow shift from confidence to caution. That's why this story lingers in public consciousness. Not because it's scandalous, but because it's plausible. Most people don't fear betrayal. They fear realizing too late that they never read the fine print. And once you start looking at this relationship through that lens, it stops feeling like a fairy tale under pressure and starts feeling like a case study in structure versus sentiment.